The battle for attention in the creator economy is fierce. But what if the secret weapon isn't a new platform, but an old technology? Today, we're diving into the world of SMS marketing for creators with Mike Donoghue, founder of Subtext, a platform that's revolutionizing how artists, brands, and influencers communicate with their fans.
It feels familiar. The barrier to entry is super, super low. There's not a lot of big tech intermediaries between you and your audience. We're going to send 10 billion text messages this year, right? But the open rate on our messaging is still 98%.
We discuss how Subtext is empowering creators to own their audience relationships, the staggering engagement rates text messages can achieve, and real examples of creators monetizing through direct fan communication. So today on the podcast, I'm joined by Mike from Subtext. Welcome to the show.
Ian, great to be on with you.
Thank you. So let's just kick off then. What is Subtext?
Yeah, so kind of an existential question. Now, one, I think I'll be able to answer. So Subtext, we're a subscription-based text messaging platform. Really sort of our goal here is to be able to connect creators with their audiences in a much more personal, bilateral, sort of fully owned fashion via SMS, right? So the way that you communicate with friends and family.
Excellent. Well, I'm really keen to understand how creators are using it and the different sort of monetization models. But let's just start. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so another really good question. So, when we originally sort of conceived of Subtext, we looked at for media companies and creators and artists and brands and athletes, the amount of time and money and love and effort and resources that went into building up these huge audiences in social channels, only for a lot of those same folks to come to the realization that, via algorithm shifts or monetization policy changes, they were renting the relationship with their biggest fans as opposed to owning a direct, meaningful bilateral form of communication. So we knew that we wanted to fix that, obviously, and in fixing it, we sort of fell in love with the medium SMS, right? So, not only the metrics, but also like the idea that fans and the voices of your community can be heard in a meaningful way. And then I guess kind of the rest is history.
I love that. I mean, I know so many creators that have felt the pain of the algorithm changes and policy changes. Can you give us a bit more details then? How does it work for a creator? How do they get set up on there?
Yeah, so super simple, right? So like we understand the creators don't have a tremendous amount of like time and resources to be like spinning up text or adding new platforms or that type of thing. So it's really easy. You end up getting in touch with somebody on our team. We spin you up a campaign. So like we want to understand like, what does your welcome message look like? Where do you want your phone number from? What are you going to be communicating with the audience? If it's going to be a monetized type of solution, right? What do you want to set your subscription price at and that sort of thing? And then, we handhold throughout the process and get it launched and get sort of the fan community built up from there.
That's great. Can you give us some sort of real tangible examples of creators that are using the platform?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like on the enterprise level, like, we do a tremendous amount of work in the music space, right? So like we have the overarching relationship with like Sony Music or BMG or Interscope or like any of these like large record labels, right? So we work with like all their talent there. But even for independent creators, right, there's a really good example, one that like I love. So we had somebody come to us I guess maybe like 2.5 years ago, and he's a UFC fight promoter and like handicapper, right? And he's like really involved in the UFC. If you're part of that world, obviously you might know him. But he said, "Look, like I love what you guys are doing. I want to be able to build my business on the platform, and I want to be able to communicate with my fans in a much more personal way. How can I get started?" And we kind of looked at it and we're like, well, you know what? Like he doesn't have the biggest following in the world. I mean, like, total like all in social platforms, maybe less than like 10,000 followers. And we're like, so, we can do it. Total audience is kind of small. Do you know what you want to charge per month to be a part of this community? And he was like, I think $129. And we were like, uh-oh, seems like a lot, right? But what, we liked him, like we loved his personality, we loved the use case. We're like, okay, cool, like let's give it a shot. and we gave it a shot. Glad that we did, because I think like this year on the platform, I think he's going to earn 400 or $500,000 in like a meaningful financial annuity from the subscriptions and the community that he's built. And this is by virtue of sending maybe a couple texts a week. So like he had this really unique perspective, he had this big personality, he didn't have the biggest audience in the world, but he had an audience that was really leaned in on what it is that he was doing. And he's able to like more than financially support himself and like fund other endeavors and that sort of thing. And again, not like over index or over rely on like some of the social platforms that otherwise like wouldn't allow his content or wouldn't allow him to monetize at that rate.
Wow. I mean, $129 sounds crazy.
Crazy.
What does a fan get for that? Is it sort of a gateway into lots more products and opportunities, or is it just that sort of one-to-one relationship almost with him?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, right? So like he will like let's say on like fight night, right? Like he'll be communicating with fans like what he's seeing round by round, like he's giving this like real-time insight. And it's a cool use of the platform because again, like if you're sharing something on social, like algorithms are going to dictate when people see that content. So it's really hard to do like live updates on particular things. So like we love the idea that he's using the medium for that, but he's also fielding questions from his community and getting back to people one-on-one, right? Which is hugely valuable. Like you wouldn't normally have that level of access to someone like him who really kind of understands what he's seeing, understands the space. So he does, live Q&As. He shares sort of first looks at content. He even like takes suggestions if he's going to like sit down with somebody and do an interview, like, hey, I'm going to be meeting with, this individual fighter. If you had a question for them, what would you ask? So really kind of creating like a much more meaningful participatory experience for the people that really love what it is that he's creating. And then, it's a great gateway to into, other products you might offer, other solutions, even like live events you might be hosting, meetups, that sort of thing. So it's a meaningful like marketing channel as well as, subscription revenue source.
Got it. And I spent a good portion of my career working for Universal Music, so very familiar with artists and musicians and their kind of business models. Is it a similar sort of use case when you're working with Sony Music?
Yeah, so like the work that we would do with Sony or even Universal, right, or like Warner BMG, it's a little bit different, right? Because they're looking at the medium as sort of a way to maintain an enduring connection with their fans, and be able to like understand who they are versus like the social platforms, like somebody follows, somebody unfollows, or even at like a concert, right? Like somebody shows up to the show, they love what they see, they leave and you never sort of know who they are, right? So the monetization of the channel with like big artists or like on the enterprise level is a little bit different, right? So like they make the ability for fans to sign up free, right? And then they want to share, if they have a new single coming out, if they have new merchandise that they're going to be dropping, if there's a new tour dates being released. They do the communication there, but like I loved this example. So we worked with like, I don't know if you know Maggie Rogers is or not, or if you're like a fan of Maggie's.
I don't,
Um,
but
so she's amazing. Check her out. But like, so one of the things that Maggie wanted to do, right, was like be able to actually hear the voices of her fans, right? So like we do SMS and that's really compelling and people can share audio back, photos back, videos back, like, hey, here I am in the crowd at, Coachella listening to your set with my friends. And like it's amazing from like a user generated content standpoint. But like she was like, hey, I want to do this like super lo-fi thing, right? And the concept was like people can call in, they can listen to like a snippet of the new single, and then I want them to like leave a voicemail for me, like expressing like what they thought about the single. And it was super cool because she used it to like derive all this really compelling content that she wouldn't get anywhere else. And then like she's reacting to it on TikTok or she's reacting to it on Insta, that type of thing. So like it was a really cool way to, in like a very literal sense, like hear the voices of her fans and like have them participate in some of the content that she was creating. So I always love that one. It sticks out to me.
got it. Yeah, no, it definitely feels like a really unique type of engagement between sort of an artist or a creator and their fans. From a data perspective, are you seeing really interesting sort of analytics and with this sort of engagement?
Yeah. So, I mean, the analytics, like when we were originally searching to solve this problem, right? One of the reasons that we fell in love with SMS was the metrics, right? Because, like, what's crazy about it is, like, even, I mean, we're going to send 10 billion text messages this year, right?
Wow.
But the open rate on our messaging is still 98%. The CTR, if like that's a metric that you care about, is north of like 32%. And then we have a metric we call engagement rate. This is really just like the percentage of the audience that is replying to like the broadcast that they receive. So like you get a message from Miley Cyrus or something like that. Like what percentage of the audience is going to respond? And that's usually north of like 20%, which tells us that like people are ascribing a huge degree of value to this interaction. Because like if you think about it, your inbox, like your messaging inbox is sort of like, tier one is friends and family. Tier three is like all the discounts that you signed up for because like you wanted 20% off as opposed to 15% off. But it takes like an insane degree of sociopathy to like reply to those tests. Right. So like no one's doing that. So we're sort of in that middle tier, right? Which is like, hey, you know what? Like I'm hearing from artists or journalists or creators that like I love in this medium that feels much more intimate. And because of the simple bilateral nature of it, like I have a way to be able to respond to this person one on one. Whereas, like, maybe I'm somebody who wouldn't be inclined to like share a comment on social or something like that. It's much more intimate in that way, which is cool. And, we love to see.
That's amazing. And from a creator perspective, what's the monetization model? What does that look like?
Yeah. So we have two models, right? So we have sort of a business model on our side that is, custom built for maybe like the largest creators or for enterprises themselves. And like in this scenario, this is just like a licensing fee for the platform. Really straightforward, right? Like we scale up from like 100 subscribers to, tens of millions of subscribers. Um, and it's a total sliding scale according to like your total audience size and that sort of thing. Then on the other side we have a model that is that sort of paid subscription model, right? No like hard costs to the creators up front. It's really more a matter of like, hey, you set your price on the platform for people to join this community, call it $5 a month, $10 a month, in Paul's case $129 a month, whatever. And then you drive subscriptions obviously, and you own not only all the data associated with that audience, but the revenue associated with the subscriptions as well. So monetization via the channel is like really straightforward. You can do subscriptions, or you can monetize it as like a more traditional marketing channel, depending on how you set it up.
Got it. That makes sense. And how do you
Mhm.
see the concept of these owned experiences evolving in the creator economy?
Yeah, I mean, so and I'm sure you've seen this at like Electrify too, right? Is like, there's so many creators that have built these massive, massive social audiences, right? And then like at some point you're like, hey, to what end am I monetizing this, right? Or to what end am I building meaningful equity in like myself and my business versus maybe somebody else's platform, right? It's like there's a huge push, and you see it in like the creator direct to consumer type offerings, right? You see it in like somebody like Mighty Networks, who I love, offering like platforms for people that want to host classes or create like these really enriched communities. Like I love that. But more and more people are looking at the social channels as sort of a top of the funnel type of execution, and then saying like, how do I convert people to an experience that I can not only directly monetize, but also creates a portable audience for me that I can take platform to platform, right? Because if X or Instagram or TikTok, change the algorithms overnight, or, in the event of like a TikTokalypse or whatever, in like however many months when, they have to address what they have to address, like really massive changes there could mean, that your audience gets cut in half, or your ability to monetize is so much more limited. So our goal always is to facilitate the empowerment of creators and give them something that they can own, right? Because like it's not, we're seeing less and less interest in the sort of sheer quantity of audience, because like that's always going to be there, but it's more like the quality of those interactions and like the quality of and durability of like the monetization that you create in an experience that you own, uh, without waxing too philosophical.
Got it, got it. And I guess like the email, the text message isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like one of these like sort of old school like lo-fi things that like even like, and I say this and it's really true. Like if you look at the demographics, people that use text messaging, right? Like
Yeah.
it's everyone from like teenagers to people's grandparents. It feels familiar. The barrier to entry is super, super low. And one of the things that we like about it is like there's not, unlike email even, there's not a lot of big tech intermediaries between you and your audience, right? Because even an email, and like, not again to get like too tinfoil hat about like the AI thing, but like Apple has their own plans for AI. Gemini and Google obviously have plans for their AI rollout. They collectively own 84% of US inboxes, let's say, right? So, like US email clients. When they decide tomorrow, next week, a year from now, that like they're just going to distill all of the content in your inbox and give you the 5 things you need to know every day, the notion that you maintained a direct line of communication with your audience via email goes out the window. Right? It's like that doesn't exist anymore because of a big tech decision. And I don't care how big of a creator you are, like you don't have a point of appeal there. Right. So, like a lot of people that we talk to, and this is media companies, artists, creators, they're like, how do I prep for like a post email world? And even if the sort of AI element wasn't going to happen, um, just demographically, like younger and younger people spend less and less time checking their email. They're not sitting in front of computers every day. So it's like if you need to get a message out urgently or you need to facilitate a sense of community, that medium is not a great one to do it in. I'm biased, but my opinion.
Yeah. There's some great insights in that. And earlier this week, I interviewed somebody who had a business supporting OnlyFans creators with AI bots responding to fans. What do you think about the role of AI from that context in your type of business?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So, like, I think AI as currently constituted, right? And like, who knows what it's going to look like in a year, 2 years, or 3 years? Like, the sort of bot concept, and Meta's played this out, right? Like, Meta already
Yeah.
shuttered their sort of like, celebrity AI bot scenario. Like, I find it to be a little disingenuous, right? It's like, the notion that like, oh, I'm talking with artist A or artist B via this chatbot and it's their voice. It's like, yeah, it's like a fuzzy approximation of like what this person might say. But like because the artist or creator has invested so little in that experience, right? It's like I just set up an AI bot to chat with you. It's like, why would I, as a fan, want to continue to invest my time if there's no reciprocation of that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a cool, like, I think it's a really cool concept. I think it's a novelty. But like when we look at AI, for example, like one of the things that we really like is like, how do we analyze all of these fan conversations that might be taking place in the space? Like if you're, creator A and you send a text out to 1 million people, like, hey, what do you think of my last video? Or what should I do next? Or whatever, and 20% of that audience gets back to you, so 200,000 people get back to you in 10 minutes, it to be able to interpret everything that everyone is saying, like that, what that audience is telling you, and then to bubble up like meaningful, interesting, actionable insights associated with that, like that's super powerful. We don't have to do a fuzzy approximation of the creator's voice in order to glean those insights. So it's still a genuine connection, but we like harness the power of AI to like create a much more valuable experience for our creators at the end of the day.
Yeah. And when you say it like that, it's not just the volume of responses, but the timeliness of the responses that you would get with a text message that you may not get through some other channel.
Yeah,
And
100%.
given sort of the personal nature of text messages, are there any sort of special, unique privacy and security concerns?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're always it's sort of one of the benefits of working with us, right? It's like because sending 10 billion messages in a year means like we have to be, and the lawyers are going to love this, we have to be really buttoned up with regards to like consent and that sort of thing. So like one of the beautiful things about our platform is like we only send messages to people that have raised their hand and like signed up to receive them, right? So
Sure.
like we're not, you know, in the US right now, like we're preparing for an election and probably everyone listening to the pod in the US is like, man, if I get another political text message, like I'm gonna fling my phone out the window because like that's unsolicited, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
want that. Maybe you don't care about it. Maybe you do care about it, but the medium is wrong for you or you're not going to take action or whatever. On our platform, 100% of the people that you're messaging have affirmatively consented, as they call it, to like receive those messages. And by virtue of that, like, you know, not to harp on the metrics at all, but like, you know, out of the millions and millions of subscribers that we have on the platform, our opt out rate is less than 1% annually. So, you know, people are ascribing a lot of value to this. They want to be a part of the conversation. And we obviously, you know, are here to make sure that everything is done above board and, you know, from a regulatory perspective, buttoned up, not just in the US, but in the 200 plus other countries that we operate in.
Got it. That makes sense. And what's the long-term goals for the business? Where do you see it heading in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, you know, we've been super encouraged by the traction that we've gotten so far, obviously, and like our core verticals. We love, like, we have a deep, abiding passion for these things, and like, we love the empowerment of creators and brands and artists and media companies and that sort of thing. So, we want to make sure that we continue to sort of own and grow and evolve in that space. I think, you know, you'll see, and you've already seen, you know, some of this from us with Pitchfork or with Coachella or something like that. We love the event space as well because there's so many people that come to concerts that, you know, again, maybe you buy a ticket, you give your information to Ticketmaster, but like nobody's showing up to hear Ticketmaster sing, right? Like they're showing up to hear these artists. So like, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is like, how do we get involved in the event space? How do we empower artists with the data that they can own and to make those, you know, connections more enduring? So there's going to be a lot from both sort of a vertical expansion standpoint and then from a continued technical differentiation. Obviously, we love the international space as well. That's why we would go through the effort to like stand up 200 countries because it's not easy. But you know, it's really important for us. We operate off of like a no fan left behind kind of mantra, right?
I really like that. That's good. Well, it's been fascinating to hear about the journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. Before we wrap up, Mike, do you have any advice to give to creators that are thinking about building these direct to fan communication channels?
Um, no, awesome question. So, I mean, for us, like the advice we give, and you know, I sort of started at the top, like mentioning this, but like, don't worry about, you know, total audience size. So we worry more about like the quality of the interaction, right, and the value. I think like we always say, focus on your first 10 community members, focus on your first 100 community members, and like really lean into the quality of that relationship and sort of activating them as your super fans and your, you know, evangelists for what it is that you're doing. And, you know, the growth will come, right? Like, you know, continue to focus on creating the content that people love and being true to your personality and not becoming an AI chatbot, right? Um, and you know ultimately like that audience will grow and your ownership stake will always be there. So you know, invest in your community, invest in yourself, and you know, continue to grow at a steady pace, and you know, you'll be amazed by sort of the exponential returns on that.
Excellent. Very wise words there. Well, thank you for taking the time to share the story. I'm always excited speaking to businesses that are offering something unique to creators or pioneering in the space. So it's been great to hear from you today. Thank you.
Ian, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you, man.